Hey guys, welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. I'm Ted, hanging out with the Nerdarchy crew.
Dave.
Ryan.
Nate.
And today we have a Game Master Tips request from MC Squared, or some of you guys might say it's Mix Squared. Let us know. So MC Squared wants to know, how do you keep over a long game fighting interesting? So what do you guys think?
Well, it's a really good question, because eventually it is just like a slogfest of combat after combat, especially if you're not using terrain features, if you're not using interesting hazards, if the players nor the DM use different tactics.
Alternative goals is like maybe you have to protect somebody and that's the main thing you want to do, or get them somewhere.
Go ahead.
Okay, I would say over the long haul, if you're looking at the monster's manual and you say, oh, this is how much damage it does, this is its attacks, and that's what you fixate most upon, it's going to be a boring fight after 13 levels of that.
Basically, make every single encounter that you have planned, because like most sessions, you're only going to have like 2 to 4 combat encounters in a given night.
Usually.
I mean, that's going to be your average. But make every single one of those have a unique feature to it. Like a different sort of thing. Some might be the straight up 20 by 40 room, like that might be one of your encounters, but the other one's going to feature a terrain or a trap or a hazard or, some sort of one person starting with an advantage.
Could even just be, the King of the Hill type deal where they're fighting their way up a dais, that, or a ziggurat, and the monsters that holds the top, and you got to take it.
Right.
There's tons of different ways, if it's a wilderness encounter, have terrain, ravines,
distance.
rivers.
Sometimes distance, because most encounters because most of them you're rounding a corner, there's the monster. Give something where there's like 600 feet between you and the foe. So this way, who's going to shine like your missilers? Either your longbowman, or if somebody took spell sniper, or your friggin' warlock. That has like the long ranged Eldritch spear. When they're being able to ping people from like 600 feet away, and like the factions are getting ready to close, that's another way to do it.
Or being hunted or stalked by a monster that is even further away when you first notice it, and it keeps like disappearing and reappearing. Not in the magical sense, just in the sense that it's moving from cover
breaking
to cover.
line of sight.
Yeah.
Just in my last session, I had they stalked up on a series of goblins. I've got them fighting a lot of goblins, so I had to vary it up. So they snuck up on a whole bunch of them, and they took them out. They had a really brutal fight with some armored zombie dwarves, and then they had a chase where they were being chased. They had to basically run out of a hold that was filled with them, and they pretty much down the mountain, like Lord of the Rings style, run the hell away. Nice. And so they had that variety of combat. So they were fighting this pretty much the same thing or similar foes, kind of all thematic together, but they had that breakup, and they also had a good amount of RP in it, in between the characters, and they also had that like variety rather than just, here you come upon some goblins, you fight them.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's
goblins, you fight them.
Maybe it's a fight on like a swaying bridge, like a rope bridge, that like they're making balance checks.
Yeah,
or
features.
Maybe, yeah,
a good way, yeah.
Or maybe like they have enough range on the thing that like so. The guys, the enemies are running at them. They're at the rope bridge. Well, they're like sawing the rope bridge. So like the fight actually doesn't happen because the party's gonna cut the rope bridge, and like most of those guys are just gonna fall off, and they're gonna pick off the guys that happen to hold onto the bridge. So like, yeah, you've really shortened that encounter, but it was interesting, and I'm sure your players had fun doing it when you describe the descending of these guys that are going off the side of the ravine.
Or maybe they're in the center of the bridge and they totally Indiana Jones it.
Right, yeah. Maybe it happens to them. Exactly.
So another thing that you can do, and it's kind of something I've picked up from other DMs, in the recent past, is to have your combats be descriptive. So when you're describing what happens, Nate says the big pitfall that DMs can fall into. Okay, the guy swings at you, you take 8 damage. If you don't describe what's going on, it gets that combat
monotonous.
slog gets monotonous and dull. So if you have that player has gotten a kill, you allow them to describe what's actually happened. And if they're not the real descriptive type, and they want to throw it back to you, then you go ahead and put something that's interesting that really makes that character, hey, you got the kill, so here's something that's really neat that you did, just based off the dice rolls.
Even leading up to the combat, it's something that has come up a few times in our videos, is like the idea of not just saying it's a goblin, you describe what the goblin looks like before. Like, eventually you might use that as a shorthand to talk about the goblins, like, after you've encountered them for the 6th time. But, like, the first 1 or 2 times, like, give them that, like, the flavor of what the thing is.
So, yeah, like, that came up in one of my recent games. I'm like, did I do that right? Or could I change it up different? Should I have described each and every monster? Because what it was it was an undead circus. At the time, the players didn't know they were undead, but some of the characters actually belonged to the circus. So like the monsters weren't new to them. So I kind of folded the race into part of the description, like kobold clowns, or kobold dog clowns, or a minotaur strongman, or a bugbear knife thrower, and a gnoll lion tamer, so different things like that. But if your characters are finding things for the first time, it is important to not just say what the monster is, or it takes away from the immersion, I guess.
Yes.
And it's easy, but it's so easy to do because if you've been playing the game for a long time, how many times can you describe the same monsters over and over again? Your players are calling the monsters out to you.
Yeah, I actually, the game I ran Thursday night, the players are off to go. The whole concept of the game was to go fight a dragon, and they come upon these short, humanoids, draconic-looking creatures. I describe them, that they look similar to the dragonborn that's in the party, but they've got a full tail, and like as the combat is going on, I let slip that it was a kobold, and somebody else calls out kobold. I'm like, whoever said anything about it being a kobold? And like, you did. I'm like, oh. so while it's possible to go into that descriptive and that kind of stuff, you then have to, as the GM, if you're trying to keep exactly what it is a secret, you then have to make sure that you're guarding your words, because as soon as you slip, oh, it's a kobold, people are like, all right, murder a thought, and that actually caused a charge to actually happen and whatnot. So.
Here's the other thing too is role playing during the combat. Intelligent monsters can and will talk. It can even just be trash talk. Allowing your players to do interesting things during the combat. Maybe there's a stack of barrels and they're just they got pegs, holding them in place. If they want to pull the peg and try and roll the barrels on the enemy, or have the enemy do that to them. Things like that will make things more memorable.
Oh, so the idea of like improv and stuff, yes ending. So if your players ask for a thing, yes, it's there. Tell them what distance it is from them so they can do something with it.
Yeah, as long as it makes sense.
Yeah. If they're in a ballroom, is there a chandelier? Hell yeah, there's a chandelier. You can do something with it. Yeah, like absolutely. So
I'm in a clearing in the forest. Excalibur in a stone. No.
No.
I'm in a forest. Is there a chandelier?
Yeah.
But there is a branch that you could climb up onto.
Yeah. There's a tree
Or swing from.
or something like that. Yeah. Within reason of the setting, if your player asks for a thing, put that thing in there. Give it to them. Within reason, not Excalibur.
Yeah. If it's going to add to the scene and make things more interesting, yeah, why not?
Especially because, this edition, it spells it out that as a part of your turn, you get a free interaction with, a set piece of the world or drawing a weapon or whatever. It's there for you to put those things into your game and have that thing be there. Absolutely. So, another thing, with integrating traps into your encounters. I have this one encounter planned for this thing I'm writing that it's basically, it's involving bullywug monks that are going to ambush the party with the shadow... Was it the shadow monk that can do darkness by spending Kai points?
Yes.
So, yeah, they're gonna darkness the party. There's a pit trap they can obviously see as a pit trap. The thing that they probably aren't going to notice is there's also a swinging log trap that the bullywugs are going to ride down. It's going to swing, hit the party. If they don't make their strength check, they get knocked into the pit trap, and the encounter starts. And the bullywugs rode the logs down so that they're already there and ready to fight. So, yeah, and that's you're setting the party up in a disadvantage. It is kind of comical, but it's going to be deadly as shit too. It's going to
you just do interesting, fun things like my Maze of Mandoon. The Minotaur always shows up, and there's part of the labyrinth's feature is the walls are always something that you don't really want to touch or get slammed into because they're pointy in some way or shape or form. So the Minotaur always pops up to ram someone into the wall and then runs away.
Yeah.
To frustrate him. So yeah, like there's different tactics that you can use. Interesting set pieces. Letting your players describe an interesting set piece that could possibly be there if it makes sense.
You know what? Actually, to get to your Minotaur real quick, like having hit and run tactics be the preferred way to do thing, where like your encounter might stretch over like minutes because it is like either one faction or the other is hitting and running the other, because that becomes another thing of like, I'm running for cover because this thing's superior to me, or you're superior to the thing that you're fighting. Like it's a bunch of kobolds or goblins. They're fighting the running battle now.
Yeah, and they're doing a hit and run time, or they're hunted, or you're being hunted. It works the same way. The kind of the idea of a chase where you guys close every once in a while. There's skirmish activity, and then for whatever reason, it gets broken up again, and you can make that go on for a while.
Yeah.
Again, like minutes, rounds going to minutes. So you have that kind of stuff. Adding traps and hazards to the battlefield makes it more interesting, and then it also gives something for your players to interact with. Oh, wait a minute, I have a reason to push someone or shove someone because it'll be fun. Or
and also too, like make doing those alternative things a little more effective than just straight up swinging. Because a lot of times it's just like, I could swing my torch and do a d6 fire. Or I can do 2d6 plus strength damage, and like, why would I ever strike somebody with a torch? But like, if there's a bunch of oil around, like, let that do like 3d10 or something like that when you light them on fire.
You break a oil flask or
it's
oil
funny
lamp.
You should mention that, because in one of our sessions, we had entertainers that were juggling open bottles of liquor, and so when the fight started, they were in the process of doing this, so they just started throwing the bottles at the bad guys, at the enemies, and then on the next turn, the other entertainer, who was a fire breather, runs up and breathes fire, which normally really is not an effective attack, but they're already soaked in essentially oil for all intents and purposes. So I'm like, sure, you want to do that? Why not? Or if it happened in a tavern and one of the players is like, I want to grab one of these giant tables and throw it at them. I'm like, sure, you can hit 3 guys with that. Make an attack roll.
And so, aside from changing the scenery, you could have changed the way the combat's done. We just went over the mass combat. I mean, you can start a world war, if you wanted to change it up instead of just having the same old encounters. You have a really big fight if your players are going to be interested in that. I would not suggest breaking out all the minis.
Mechanically
like,
changes the scene.
Yeah. So that mechanically, they're learning something different. So if they're all a whole bunch of played a while, maybe they want to see something like a mass combat. They might have never done a mass combat. So it might be something that they want to do later, or they say like, that was fun, but I don't really like doing it again. But it still changes up the experience.
Or you assign them the objective isn't to fight and kill the thing. Like maybe either it's a superior foe or whatever the circumstances.
They have to capture the damsel.
Well, you're right. Yeah, save the dragon. Slay the damsel.
Yeah.
But no, like the idea that like maybe they're doing an espionage recon thing, where like the objective is to get information, not to like skirmish and fight anybody, because they're like going into an army encampment. It's an encounter, but it's not a combat encounter.
Well, yeah, that's also a really good point. Is not just changing up how combat happens, but if they're always doing combat, well, okay, don't do combat. Do something different.
Right.
Completely change the genre on them.
You could have you could also have that that whole concept of not always having combat. You could have that chase sequence you were talking about before, but actually have it be like a skill challenge that they're trying to get away from this thing, and all right, the corridor is 100 feet or 1,000 feet, whatever. So you have to cover that distance while there's challenging things in the way. This thing can't go into the light. It's totally a Underdark type creature. So all you need to do is get to the outside, and this thing will leave you alone.
Or maybe you're in a jungle being chased by a giant, terrible 4-armed gorilla, and there's you got to dodge under logs, leap over things, climb trees, run away, all that kind of stuff. You have like different skill checks involved in that as well, or just even intuitive, like right or left. I'm making a split-second decision. You roll high enough, you pick the right path, or you just choose it based on
arbitrarily.
Arbitrarily, like, hey, I'll go left. Well,
You roll a
chosen
D2
poorly.
or
Perhaps you
D4.
should have rolled.
There's a cliff over there.
Yeah.
Son of a bitch.
So by having that skill challenge, especially one that has like a predetermined number of rounds in order for you to get to an objective, like, all right, this thing in the underground, you can't kill it. Your items aren't strong enough, your magic isn't strong enough, whatever. But all you need to do is escape, and you'll be fine.
Make it to the light.
Or outrun your party members.
You just need to be the
Be a
first
monk or a
one.
barbarian.
The outrunning the gorilla, well, it's kind of cool, unless it's being set to, well, if you get to...
Well, let's say it's like a temple guardian or something.
there you
Or
go.
it could be perhaps when during the chase for 5th edition, there's specific rules.
It could
So
be
if we're
light
talking
sensitive.
5th edition, you've got the exhaustion thing. Not exhaustion like in the Dungeon Master's Guide. I mean, there's exhaustion from other things, and then there's exhaustion from the chase. They're not the same exhaustion. Because the exhaustion from the chase won't ever kill you.
Right.
While the exhaustion and the condition can actually kill you if you get through it. So you just can't run anymore.
Well, and also, too, it's a matter of objective. Like, if that thing's objective is to eat you as a meal, and it realizes, I'm not going to spend that much time chasing after this thing to eat it, because I can find easier prey. So, I mean, it's a matter of, like, how important you are to it.
The pain in the ass factor.
Yeah.
And when you're chasing somebody, if you're the one being chased, you're dashing twice, hopefully, if you're smart. You're just running away. While it's going to dash after you, but it's going to eventually want to try and eat you or damage
Throw
you.
stuff
So
at
it
you
will
or
run
whatever.
and attack, and then you're going to have that extra 20, 30 movement on it again until it catches up to you again. And so it's kind of like you're getting hurt sometimes, you're running sometimes, you're avoiding it other times. So you can make it, you can make it really interesting. It's obviously mostly on the DM, and also the players kind of buy into.
And also,
they
too,
might get eaten by this thing.
It should never, that thing, I could imagine being hella tedious. If you're just having people roll dice and you're never you have to flavor that. You have to say you just tucked and rolled under a log and then you get up and you start sprinting or whatever, or you just sprained your ankle because you rolled a 1 and now you're hobbling along. But you have to really romance the narrative of what's happening, because if it's just rolling dice,
so if you hurt your leg,
tedium.
you may want to try and hide.
Yeah.
And it'll continue running after everybody else.
The rest of the party.
And
But
then-
you're now stuck behind enemy lines.
Yeah.
So that's fun.
Well, at that point, you just have to hope it catches somebody else and gets full.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's your only hope.
You make a perpendicular run there,
Yeah.
hoping it doesn't come back for you.
So essentially, to recap, for keeping it interesting in combat is one. Sometimes it's not combat. Mix that up. Change up. Make your combats happen in interesting places for monsters and players to interact with.
Use your terrain and your scenery.
Yeah, sometimes it's going to be, maybe it's slippery terrain, you're fighting on ice, and you have to make a DC 5 or 10 acrobatics check to keep your balance, to not fall prone, basically. So, you put just little features in like that, or you're on, the rocking prow of a ship and trying to fight. So put in some ability checks sometimes. Yeah.
Role playing in the middle of the combat.
Yeah.
Make sure you have your monsters trash talk. The players can trash talk. Maybe the villain monologues and drops important information. So there's different things like that.
Or they're saying this whole thing is a distraction while we're fighting here. This other thing's happening on the other side of the city. So you just put the next thread or seed for what's happening in your campaign. The players are aware of it, but they have to deal with this combat encounter before they can even go deal with that.
Before the plot can move on.
Yeah.
What else was there? Was there anything?
Have your combats be descriptive,
Yeah.
and having your players take part in that description.
Yeah, definitely spice it up.
Because sometimes it's not the quantity, but the quality of the interaction back and forth.
When we did that the meat grinder with SR2 Jokers game for Brigade Con, that was the first time I ever was like, oh, the DM's giving me the ability to describe my kill. I like that. So I've kind of begun to adapt that with my campaign.
Well, yeah, it adds more of the shared world experience. So I think we covered a slew of ways to, over the course of a long campaign, to keep things fun and interesting and not have everything just degenerate to roll a d20.
It's like a long-term marriage, man. You gotta spice it up every once in a while,
That's it.
So,
And with that, you guys can let us know what you think. Give your suggestions below in the comments. Like, share, subscribe.
You can check us out on nerdarchy.com.
Or over at Facebook.
You can also join the conversation over on Reddit.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.